Welcome to the Lambton College International Graduate Services and Support Center, your dedicated resource for navigating life after graduation. We know the journey can be complex, from understanding immigration processes to making career decisions and expanding your professional network. That's why we're here, to simplify these challenges and support your transition into Canadian life. At the International Graduate Services and Support Center, our mission extends beyond your academic achievements. We are here to facilitate your successful integration into the Canadian workforce and society. From career counseling to workshops on Canadian workplace culture and immigration support, our services are tailored to meet the unique needs of international graduates. We're committed to empowering you with the tools and knowledge necessary for success. Embrace the opportunity to connect with fellow graduates and professionals through our networking events and stay informed with our comprehensive webinars covering a range of topics crucial for your postgraduate success. Remember, the path to achieving your aspirations is a journey we undertake together. Ready to take the next step? Visit our website and join our supportive community. Remember to follow us on Instagram and on LinkedIn for upcoming immigration webinars, networking events, and much more. Together, let's make your postgraduate journey a success.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Cristina Yiguren, and I'm the coordinator of the International Graduate Services and Support Center. I want to remind you that we are recording this webinar so that you can watch it later on our YouTube channel, and you're also going to get the recording shortly. I want to invite you as well to follow us on our social media accounts where you are going to find the latest information about the center. As you know, this center is dedicated to assisting you, our international graduates, as you seek employment and settle into Canadian life following graduation. Our international graduates have access to immigration, career advice, and networking events. Also, I want to remind you that there are countless reasons why you can take pride in being a Lambton graduate, as I'm also very proud of working here. We've been ranked as one of Canada's top research colleges, and we're here to support you all the way, even after graduation, with the services from this center. Today, we're going to have an amazing session with one of our best immigration consultants, for sure. She is Elizabeth Long. Elizabeth is a leading immigration lawyer in Canada. Elizabeth holds a Juris Doctor law degree from University of Toronto, and she also holds a Master of Law degree from York University. Elizabeth has been certified by the Law Society of Ontario as a specialist in citizenship and immigration law, a prestigious list of which only approximately 65 lawyers in Canada belong, which is also always very, very impressive to say that. We're going to cover a very important topic today. So if you have been already working here in Canada, our graduates, and you got your PGWP a year and a half ago, or even 2 years ago, this is a perfect webinar for you, as your PGWP may be about to expire. So this SOS immigration webinar will show you what to do if your PGWP is about to expire. Again, we have an immigration lawyer with us today, and she's great. If you've been following us, I'm sure you know her already. And it's a pleasure to have you all graduates. And Elizabeth, thanks a lot once again for joining today.
Thank you so much, Christina. It's a pleasure to be here today. So let me just share my slides here. Hold on for 1 second.
Perfect. We're leaving the Q&A for your questions. Remember to keep your questions in the Q&A, and we will go through them at the end of the webinar.
Yes. Now, are you seeing the right screen there?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, guys. So today we are going to be talking about how to extend your work permits and different ways. You only get one postgrad work permit in your lifetime, and during COVID, there were some policies to allow students to basically extend it, but that's no longer the case. So people often ask me, well, how do I extend my work permit? And the question is not necessarily how, but if you can extend your work permit. Let me just go through some of the basics first, and then we're going to go into different types of work permits that are out there. So you have to qualify for a work permit in order to be able to obtain another work permit. Okay. Now, first of all, let's say you qualify and you submit your work permit application. Now, the law is you have the legal right to stay and work in Canada as long as you submit your work permit before it expires. Okay? You submit the work permit extension before it expires, and you submit it by paying for the right fees, submitting the form, and you're actually putting it through the system, and it confirms in the system that you've submitted your application. Okay? Now, even if your work permit is rejected in the end, you have the legal right until you have that decision to work and stay in Canada. Okay? Now, the issue is if you want to leave Canada while you are on implied status. So, implied status is after your work permit expires and before your new work permit is issued. If you submitted the application to extend before your current work permit expires, then you have implied status after your work permit expires till you get your decision. And that's called implied status. Like I said, you can stay and work in Canada until the new decision is made. But if you leave Canada in that interim period, then you will lose your implied status. So even if you're able to come back, let's say you have a visitor visa or you don't need a visa, you're able to come back, you're not allowed to continue to work. You might be able to be here as a visitor, but you're not allowed to work until the decision is made. So keep that in mind. Stay in Canada in between. Okay? Now, the IRCC does something that they try to be useful, but it can cause a lot of confusion. And that is the WPEXT letter. Okay, so when you file an extension in Canada, most of the time you will receive something in your portal. It's labeled WPEXT. Okay, and that letter will say something like, you have the legal right to work until this date or until a decision is made, whichever comes first. Now, most people, when they read that, think, oh, well, if I don't have a decision after this date, then I have to stop working, right? Because this letter says I can work only until this date. That is wrong. The law allows you to continue on and work until a decision is made. This date is a random date that is generated. Sometimes it used to say 3 months, sometimes it was 6 months, sometimes it's a year now, but it doesn't matter. This letter does not give you status. This letter is a letter that IRCC generates to try to be helpful. So, for example, if you bring it to your OHIP, right, you can extend your OHIP that way. You can show it to your employers, although it can get very confusing for them too if you don't have a decision by that date. Okay, so don't worry about that date per se for your status. You can continue to work until a decision is made. Okay, I've added a link on the IRCC website that kind of explains that to you. And so if you have an employer who's getting very antsy because you don't have a decision by this date, you can even click on this and you can show it to them. Okay, so let's talk about the different kinds of work permits. I've included in here some of the different types of work permits that are out there. Essentially, there's a two kinds of work permits. There's open work permits and there's employer specific work permits. Okay. Now, with open work permits, you can work anywhere you like. That's like the post-grad work permit, right? There's some other kinds of open work permits. The employer specific work permit, the employer is noted on your work permit and you're only able to work for the employer. And most of the time you're restricted by the position as well. And even sometimes the location. Okay. And for the employer-specific work permits, there's two programs. One is called the LMIA, Labor Market Impact Assessments, and the other is IMP. IMP work permits are employer-specific work permits that are LMIA exempt. LMIAs, you have to apply to ESDC, the Labor Department in Canada, first to get an opinion before you can qualify for the work permit. The IMP, the employer just files an offer of employment on the government's employer portal, and then you can apply directly for the work permit. Okay, so let's just get into some of these, what they mean. Okay, so open work permits, you're probably most familiar with them because you have the post-grad work permit. Okay, there are other kinds, such as the bridging work permit. The bridging work permit is something where you have progressed to a certain stage for your permanent residence. For example, if you have an express entry application, and you've been invited to apply and you submit your application, then you will get an acknowledgement of receipt, and then you can apply for your open work permit. Okay, and there are other kinds of like provincial nominations. There's other caregiver, etc. Okay, so there's other kinds of bridging work permits. The open spousal work permit, those are for people who, there's two kinds. One, you are married or you have a common law relationship. So you've been with someone lived with someone in a conjugal relationship for at least 1 year. And your spouse is a foreign worker or student. The student, now you have to have a master's or PhD program with 18 months. Uh, 16 months. Or if you're a worker with a work permit of 16 months, or the permanent residence and the worker 16 months, it depends on the occupation. And the bridging, or you've submitted your permanent residence and you've qualified to a certain extent. Okay. There's another open spousal work permit for those people who are being sponsored by their Canadian or permanent resident spouse, and you receive an acknowledgement of receipt, and it's kind of like the bridging work permit that way. For certain nationals of certain countries it depends on the country, who are under the age of 30 or 35, depending on the country, you may be able to get working holiday work permits as well. And you put yourself into the pool and you can be selected for that. Okay, so it depends on your age and your nationality. So those are some of the most common open work permits. Now, let's move on to the employer-specific work permit. So the employer-specific work permits, first you have the Labor Market Impact Assessment, the LMIA, okay? These are applications that most employers dread. They really don't like them because they have to do a lot of work. They have to advertise and show they can't find a Canadian to do the job. Furthermore, the government last year put in a lot of restrictions, especially for LMIAs, where the wage is under the median wage that they have specified. Median wage plus, I think it was 30%. So oftentimes you're looking at, I think in Toronto, in Ontario, it's like $34 and something cents per hour. And if your salary is under that hourly wage, in most large cities like Toronto or etc., where the unemployment rate is over 6%, you are not able to apply. The employer is not able to apply for an LMIA unless your wage is above that that cutoff line. Certain areas that are more rural, or if the unemployment rate is over the 6%, you are able to, in certain occupations, for example, occupations like a caregiver occupation or certain construction, you are able to do that. Okay. So then we have the low wage and we have the high wage. And then we have something called the global talent stream. So the global talent stream is one of my favorite LMIAs to do. And that is because it is a very fast processing time and it bypasses the recruitment efforts. So recruitment, normally for LMIA, the employer has to advertise for at least a month to show that they can't find a Canadian to do the job. The global talent stream, they don't need to do the recruitment. Instead, if your occupation falls under one of the STEM occupations that is listed, and your salary, all the LMIAs, you have to meet median wage at least, um, for your occupation, that is, then you could possibly apply under this program. And again, it's a 2-week processing time for the employers and no recruitment is required. Okay. So this is for the LMIA kind of work permits. This is the default. If you don't fit in one of the other exceptions that I'm going to talk about, then the only way to get a work permit would be if your employer, this is an employer application, they would have to do a LMIA. And by the way, for the LMIAs, it is against the law for a lawyer or consultant or any representative to charge you money. The employer cannot charge you money. Everything, all the costs must be paid by the employer, and they're not supposed to claw back that money from you. We know that there's a lot in the past, especially when arranged employment points were there for express entry, that a lot of employers or shady consultants were charging arm and a leg for these LMIAs. That is completely illegal. Okay, LMIAs have to be borne. All the costs have to be borne, including recruitment, including legal costs, including government fees, have to be borne by the employer. Okay, so beyond the LMIAs, we then go to other applications where the employer doesn't have to apply for the LMIA. The LMIA process, depending on which one it is, global talent stream is, faster, right? But the other ones, you're looking at several months for the government processing time, recruitment, etc. These other kinds of applications that are employer specific falls under the International Mobility Program. And under the International Mobility Program, the employer just has to put in information in an employer portal called the Offer of Employment. And once they submit the information, it's automatically generates a number, and that's all we need in order to then move forward and apply for the work permit. So the free trade agreement professionals is one of my favorite ones to do. If you are a national of certain countries like Mexico, US, Peru, Colombia, the EU, UK, Ukraine, Chile, Panama, Korea, Japan, Australia. So there's a wide number of countries. If you're a national of that country, and depending on the free trade agreement, if you have a job offer for one of the professional or technical jobs, technicians or professional jobs, then we could apply for a work permit for you under one of those free trade agreements. Francophone, if you can, and they only look at speaking and listening, okay? We don't even need to look at reading and writing. Just speaking and listening, you pass the CLB of 5. Okay, this is much lower than the express entry one. The CLB of 5, speaking or listening, then we can apply for a work permit for any job outside of Quebec. Religious or charitable, if you are working for a religious organization or charitable organization, and the work that you do is of a charitable nature, then we could apply for a work permit for you. Significant benefit, we use this for certain kind of things. Sometimes for artists, or athletes. We can mostly for artists, self-employed artists, if you're going to make a significant contribution to the artistic community in Canada, or for those people who are doing work that will be of significant benefit to Canada. For example, you are going to be responsible for the health and safety of a railway in Canada, or those kind of situations. Um, then we could apply for a work permit that way. IEC Young Professionals. So remember how I talked about the IEC working holiday? So the IEC working holiday is an open work permit, but remember these kind of IEC programs, they do get taken up because there's a draw. Okay, it's a lottery to see. And so there's a lot of people who don't have job offers who are applying from outside of the country who would go through the working holiday. But for those of you who have a job, we could apply under the IEC Young Professionals program. If you're a national of those programs, a Young Professionals is an employer-specific work permit, but again, the employer just has to file the offer of employment, and then we can apply. Reciprocal agreement is something where if we can show, like we do this for athletes, for example, if we can show that there are athletes that are, working, or coaches that are working in the same kind of field for Canada, outside of Canada, in those countries, that we can do that. Or if you are working for a company and that company is a multinational company that sends and provides opportunities for Canadians to go abroad as well. And entrepreneurs. So there is certain programs where if you can show that you own at least majority shares, 50%, 51% of the business, and your business is going to create significant benefit to Canada, then we could apply for an entrepreneur work permit for you. All right, now I wanted to speak about refugee claims because we've noticed that a lot of students are now wondering, and they've been told, oh, if you file a refugee claim, then you can apply for a work permit and you can get a work permit that way. And I wanted to speak a little bit about this to you because I need you guys to understand the serious consequence of filing a refugee claim. Okay, so first of all, in order to pass and be recognized as a refugee, not everyone, just because you don't want to go back, will be a refugee. Okay, so the law is very specific. To be a convention refugee, you would have to fear persecution under one of specific grounds of persecution: race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, for example, the LGBTQ community, and or political opinion. Okay, and or if you are at risk of torture or cruel and unusual treatment or punishment. Okay, so the bar is very high. And even if you were suffering from that in your hometown, for example, but you could go to another place in your country where you would be safe, you would not qualify. Okay, so no internal flight alternative. So the bar is very high for refugee claims. If you're going to make a refugee claim, you would have to go before a board member, and you would have to convince them, provide evidence, and go through a hearing. Okay, and we don't normally recommend this for most international students. There are certain exceptions where you actually qualify for this, that and you don't have any other alternatives, that we might take a look at it. But for vast majority of international students, it's not recommended. Why? First of all, once you make the refugee claim, you cannot go back. Even if you wanted to withdraw your application, withdrawing your application is the same as a denial. Okay, so once you make a refugee claim, you basically are issued a conditional removal order. If your claim is denied, you have 30 days to leave the country. Otherwise, you will need special minister's permission to come back, whether it's denied or whether you withdraw the application. Okay. And once you make that step to make a refugee claim, you can just forget about ever getting another temporary resident document. Okay. So you won't be able to get a visa. You won't be able to get a work permit that gives you status. If you make a refugee claim, yes, you can apply for a work permit. But on that work permit, it will specifically say does not confer temporary status. Okay, so and you can apply for study permits. Same, does not confer temporary status. Okay, and so when you do so, you will not be able to get a temporary residence status. Why is that important? If you ever need to leave the country, want to come back to Canada, you will need to have a temporary residence status. And the officers are not going to trust, for the most part, that you are going to leave the country when you're supposed to leave the country, right? One of the main things is they want to see if you're going to make a refugee claim. That is why for most of the visa requiring countries, they're visa requiring because there's a high number of refugee claimants from that country. Okay. Third, once you go down the refugee stream, many programs, for example, the provincial nominee programs like OIMP, the work experience you get for, express entry, RNIP or RSIP, many of the economic streams, caregiver, etc., you will be unable to apply, or you will be barred from getting many of the conditions that you will need in order to get permanent residence. And finally, even if you are found to be a refugee, you win your hearing, and you can apply for permanent residence, you can apply for citizenship. But the Canadian law has something where if they find out that you have been back to the country where you have claimed refuge, they can strip you of your permanent residence or citizenship. Okay, so this is not something that you should do lightly. This is certainly something that for most people you don't want to do. And for those people who really, really, really need it, you have to speak to a lawyer who understands refugee claims, but he also understands your other options as well. And you can make an informed decision. There is a bill that was just announced a couple of weeks ago. So it's going through Parliament and might be passed soon, where the government now bars those who did not make a refugee claim within 1 year of your arrival. So in those situations, you can go and say, I want to make a refugee claim. But if you've been in Canada for more than a year, then you won't be able to make a refugee claim. And so this is not law yet, but it is moving through the legislature and might be passed very shortly. Okay. By the way, for those of you who have been part of our webinars before, we probably already have you on the newsletter list. For those of you who haven't, we automatically just put everybody who comes to our webinar on a list where we can basically send you information on laws that change. Because what I tell you today may be true today, but maybe even an hour after I tell you, the laws could change. And certainly, I think a month or 2 months, there's always new changes. Okay, so the only way that I can tell you about these things is to put you on that list. And if you don't like it, you can certainly just desubscribe as well. Okay, unsubscribe. All right, so some pieces of practical advice about what you should do. First of all, uh, you can speak with a lawyer. Okay, you have to go to a lawyer and speak about your options. Without understanding, don't just go and hunt through the internet and ask your friends and etc. This is one of the most important steps in your life. If you want to stay in Canada, you have to make sure that you get proper advice. After you speak with the lawyer, you may be able to obtain another work permit if you have your employer to help. Now, oftentimes I offer to speak with the employer directly. This is because um, a lot of what the employers need to do is very specific, and most of them would feel comfortable speaking with me so that I can advise them on what to do. And most of the time, the employers also are worried about certain things like liability, how much they have to do, what the costs are, etc. So it's important, even if your employer really, really wants to help you, that you have a lawyer speak with the employer as well. Okay. Try to keep in status. Try not to be out of status as much as you can. Okay. Um, for the post grad work permit, some of you, if you haven't graduated yet and you are only graduating with a 1 year program and you only get a 1 year post grad work permit, that may very well not be enough. Okay, so speak with before you go and just apply for post grad work permit just because you can. Speak with a lawyer about your overall plan. Okay, um, if your postgrad work permit isn't expiring for another 1 or 2 years, that's good. But even at that point, you need to plan on how you might be able to apply for permanent residence. If you can't get permanent residence, how you might be able to extend your work permit. You might want to think about teaming up with your spouse, spousal work permits. Maybe somebody goes back to school. We want to evaluate your family as a whole. Okay. And finally, again, plan some more. Laws change all the time. And, for our clients, we're constantly looking at different options for our clients. Okay, so here is my information for our law firm. If you would like to book a consultation, do let us know you're coming from Lambton College because we offer Lambton College students a discounted rate. It's $100 plus tax. And so let us know you've come from Lambton College, and then we can schedule a consultation session for you to meet with one of our lawyers. All right, so if you have any questions at this point, I think we can put you into the Q&A. And Christina, did you want to go through these questions?
Sure. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. As always, very informative. And now you know what are your options and what is not really recommended for you. So we can get started. The first question is, can we visit the home country during Region Work Permit?
Yeah, if you hold a work permit, not while you're applying for the work permit, but if that work permit has been issued, it's just like any other work, just like your post-grad work permit. If you need a visa to come back, you may need to, and your visa has expired, you may need to apply for another visa after you get your work permit. That should normally expire at the same time as your work permit. If not, and you can come back with an ETA, then that's fine.
Amazing. I have applied for an extension as I got 2 years of PGWP as my passport was expiring. Am I eligible for an extra year? I have until October. It's been about 2 months since my application. What happens after that?
So you can certainly, so the one thing about applying to extend your postgrad work permit is if you didn't get the full length of time for your postgrad work permit, you can get it up to the 3 years. But let's say that your you're already past, you're on maintained status and you're already past the full length of your postgrad work permit. Then by the time the officer gets to it, if you're past the whole 3 years, at that point they probably would reject it. So you'll have to see about other ways to qualify for a work permit.
Great. We have here its Francophone Mobility Program expired on June 12th with CLB 5 requirements, going back to CLB 7 requirements.
No, the Francophone Mobility Program for the work permit is still the CLB 5.
Right, still CLB 5, so no worries unless we hear something different. Should I apply? My work permit is expiring in January 2027.
January 2027 is still a year and a half away. Normally, it's taking around 8 months these days to do it, so it's still a little bit too early to do so. But we will want to see how you might be able to extend your work permit, because sometimes the LMIAs could take a while to get. So, we can certainly come and we can do an assessment for you and make a plan for you.
All right. She's also asking when should she, or she applied if it's expiring in January 2027.
Yeah, we'll need to come for a consult and we'll need to make a plan and see.
Perfect. If one decides to go for work permit using the French stream, will that support my dependents?
So for your spouse, there's specific rules now for your spouse. So the spouse, if it's a knock O or not 0 or 1, and it's 16 months, you're okay. If it's knock 2 or 3, it depends on the occupation. It has to be on the priority list. And 4 or 5, you won't get the spousal work permit.
Right. It's experience outside Canada considered for French category draw instead of in Canada experience.
Sorry, is experience out considered a French category draw instead of Canadian experience? So that is express entry, permanent residence, or OIMP as well. That could be, but we won't get into that. I think we've done some of these permanent residence webinars before, that you can take a look, and we can do some more in the future.
Perfect. Again, one question about PGWP. My PGWP is expiring in October. Is it possible to extend my PGWP or change to another work permit? My company doesn't support LMIA.
So come for a consultation and we can see what would be done.
Yeah, there are many options, as Elizabeth was mentioned. So probably if you book a consultation, you will be able to find the best option for you. It's important.
The options I've offered are like normal basic applications. There are other kinds of applications that can be done as well. So come and let's take a look at what's possible.
Amazing. Yeah, we do have a lot of questions. You're telling us your expiring date. There's another one, June 2026. I'm applying for work permit. Is my spouse eligible to work during that time?
So your spouse for implied status has their own implied status, right? So your spouse would apply for an extension while their work permit, before their work permit expires. So they have their own implied status. But in order to get a work permit, spousal work permit, then they have to follow the rules for the spousal work permit.
All right, this one is very interesting. My work permit is expiring in August 2025. Can I go for a study permit? What are the requirements for that?
You could apply for another study permit, but when you finish that program, you're not going to get another postgrad work permit if you already have a postgrad work permit. So all of this means we have to basically have a consultation and have a plan for you.
Exactly. Probably if you are married, it's a good idea that your spouse actually applies and you will get as a couple.
Yeah, it could be. It could be.
All right, let's see what else we have. Could you please talk about I don't know if this is correct, the dummy work permit?
Sorry, the
That
dummy work.
dummy work permit?
So I think what they mean is if you apply to extend your work permit, but you may not qualify for a particular work permit. It's not representation if you say you are submitting the application and you don't really qualify. You're not going to get misrepped if you just submit the application. Now, if you submit the application and it'll probably be rejected really fast because you don't qualify. Or sometimes, because sometimes they pull out the work permits, but a lot of times you submit the application. Misrepresentation is when you provide information to the officer that is not real, right? But if you everything on your application is real, they can't cite you for misrepresentation. But you just have to know that you do qualify. For example, sometimes we apply for LMIA, and the work permit is due before we can actually have the LMIA in hand. So we will file the work permit before the work permit expires, even if we don't have the LMIA in hand. Keep that person in status, and once we have the new LMIA, we update the application.
Good, yeah, they are saying that some immigration consultants are recommending that application. So again, be very careful. I have heard a lot of different information from immigration consultants. So probably go with an immigration lawyer who they really understand the law and they can help you a little bit better. Do you support with OIMP, IOI, especially with the new employer pathway, and how will you support?
So the OIMP is coming out with a new system, and if you sign up, we're going to be sending out some newsletters about this, some news about this. It's going to be the same streams. It's just that the system now will allow the employer to submit information on their own, and the applicants will submit information on their own. It's a good system. They had sort of I had met with the program managers last year and they showed it to us. I think it's a good system. But you do need to know that unlike currently, which shouldn't do anyway, you can just put yourself into the pool without telling the employer. In the new system, the employer has to put in their part before you can actually submit your profile. So it's a good thing that way. We certainly work with the employers from the very beginning in order to make sure that they understand what they need to do and help them and represent them in their submissions.
Perfect. I received an OIMP invitation. Congratulations. But my PGWP expires soon. Can I use the nomination to extend my work permit?
Yeah. So that's great that you received the OIMP invitation. You probably won't get the nomination for a while. It's taking 3 to 6 months normally for the OIMP to be processed. What you could do is file the application for your work permit, submit it before it expires, but say, tell the officer like this OIMP application is currently in process, and then update your application afterwards. So keep yourself in status and then update your application afterwards.
Great. This one's interesting. If a child has a study permit, can parents extend their work permit through the child's study permit?
No, you don't get spousal. It's a spousal work permit, not parental work permit.
Great. Let's see what else. I don't know if you're looking at any question you would like to reply, Elizabeth. There are very specific questions, and for that, we'd really recommend you to book an appointment so you can go through your specific case.
It says there's one says, can my employer's lawyer be my lawyer? So whenever we represent, and we do represent a lot of employers who want to help their employees as well, which they're very good employers. Yes, they can represent you. Now you just have to be aware though that usually it's the same thing, right? Usually there's no conflict of interest because both of you guys want the same thing. But sometimes, for example, if the employer has a separate interest from you, so for example, if you might want to change employers, quit your job, etc., there could be a conflict of interest in those situations where then the lawyer has to withdraw.
Good. Can you please elaborate on Francophone work permit, on what the employer has to do for extending his work permit, and can you also apply for a spouse on Francophone work permit?
I think I discussed this already. Basically, it's the employer would have to file an offer of employment on the employer portal. So if you do speak French to a certain level, come and speak with us, and we can certainly represent your employer, represent you, and help you with that. The Francophone work permit, I would say, if you can get your speaking and listening to the 5 level, that's one of the easiest ways to extend your work permit. As for your spouse, the spouse has to follow the rules. So it depends on whether or not you have the job offer and you have the work permit that would meet the rules.
Okay, this one is kind of different. It's about a close work permit. My PGWP will expire on April 2026. If I am applying for a closed work permit, is my spouse eligible to work during that time? Thank you.
We already talked about the spousal work permits a lot. There are different rules for the spousal work permits. And you know what I can do, Christina, is I can put that link in the chat
That's good.
box.
Perfect, thank you.
That might be something you can take a look at. But it depends on how long your work permit is for, how what your occupation is, and whether or not you have applied for permanent residence under one of the eligible categories. Let's see here. I'll look for it and I can put that in there in the chat.
Perfect, thank you so much. And there are lots of questions regarding LMIA that we have already discussed, and some people are saying that unfortunately they joined a bit late. You will be getting the recording, and it is also going to be on our YouTube channel, so you can review everything. And if still you have any questions, we're going to host this same session in the afternoon. You will just need to register once again. And again, if you need to go in deep with your case, we do recommend you to book an appointment with Elizabeth. It's $100, which is really a low price that she's offering us, plus taxes. And you will have very well quality and explanation, and you will get to know what's the best path for you to get your PR, especially if you are really struggling and your PGWP is about to expire, that we are seeing quite some comments about that. So it's good that you take a moment and you book this consultation, so you analyze all your offers and options.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, Elizabeth, if you want to reply anything else that we haven't reviewed during the webinar.
I think a lot of these, so I just put the link for,
Thanks.
spousal work permits in the chat box. I think a lot of these questions are very specific, and it's difficult for us to answer because I don't have enough information, and second, there is a privacy issue. I highly recommend that you come and email us, and we can certainly go through your specific plan. And this is recorded as well, so if you want to take a look at, or you can join our session in the afternoon as well, in the evening.
Absolutely. You will find Elizabeth's information in the chat as well. There's an email where you can send your inquiries, and also the website. So go ahead, check it out, and also the link that Elizabeth sent about the spouses. So check all this information, and if still you do have questions, join us for our afternoon session and try to book a consultation. This process, it's very important for all of us, and we understand how important it is for you as well. So it takes time, and it takes a lot of effort, and it means sometimes, yeah, we need to pay to get the information that we really need. Sometimes, unfortunately, we cannot do it by ourselves. So we recommend you to go with a lawyer, and Elizabeth is a great lawyer. You heard it already. She's a part of she's part of 65 immigration lawyers, right, in Canada, which is so amazing. So we got you the best here. So we do recommend you to book this consultation and get all your questions answered. I really hope you get great value today's webinar, and we could answer a couple of questions. Still, as Elizabeth was saying, there are some very specific questions we cannot address at this moment, but we'll be happy to keep supporting you in our upcoming webinars. So I think thank you, Elizabeth. And we're going to conclude our webinar for today. Again, if you want, you can join at the afternoon. And it's been a pleasure. Again, Elizabeth, thank you for sharing all your knowledge.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. These days, yes, the government is really trying to have a lot of people leave Canada, but it's a matter of strategy. If you can last for the next couple of years in Canada, the government, I think, is looking. We have to have a certain number of permanent residents every year, otherwise, our economy will collapse. So in the last few years, the government had made a lot of mistakes in not having any sort of limits on international workers and students. If you can last for the next 2 or 3 years, your chances of getting permanent residence will be a lot higher. And so today, what we're trying to do is to look at ways and offer you some ideas of ways in which you might be able to extend your work permits, and hopefully you can be one of those people who can last for the next while and get your permanent residence soon. Okay?
Great, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. And thanks to our graduates. And I hope to see you this afternoon and then our upcoming webinars. Thanks again and have a lovely day. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.